Well, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen wrapped up her three-day trip to China. And while in the communist country, she said the U.S. will listen to Beijing's complaints about security-related curbs on technology exports. Secretary Yellen also defended White House measures on trade with China. During her visit, China sent more than a dozen military planes and warships into airspace and water around Taiwan. We go now to Gordon Chang, author of The Great U.S.-China Tech War and the Upcoming Collapse of China. Gordon, great to see you as always. A lot to get to. But first, I want to get your thoughts on Secretary Yellen's trip to Beijing. How do you think it went? And what do you make of these continued outreach from the White House to China?
Yeah, this is really wrong policy on our part. It's China engaged in dangerous and provocative activities against the U.S. It should be the Chinese trying to mend relations, not us. And we have sent one high-level emissary to Beijing after another, especially with Janet Yellen bowing 3 times to a subordinate official. The Chinese are starting to think that we're vassals and that we're acknowledging our subordinate status to the Grand Chinese Court. So I think China is going to become much more belligerent going forward. And this is really taking us in a direction we don't want to go.
Yeah, and Gordon, as we mentioned during Secretary Yellen's visit, Beijing actually sent warships and fighter jets to Taiwan. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, China is continuing to pressure Taiwan. They do that with warships. They do that with planes, sometimes circling the island. And really, this is an attempt to intimidate everybody into submission. But also at the same time, China has sent vessels over to Reed Bank in the South China Sea, which is part of the Philippines, and they're trying to take that away from Manila. So really what we're seeing is not only the pressure in Taiwan, but also farther south. And this really means that China's on the warpath right now. It wants to pick a fight, and the United States needs to make it clear that we will defend our friends and allies. And the problem is, by talking nice in Beijing, we're basically eroding deterrence.
How concerning is this, Gordon? I mean, what do you think we should do?
Well, I think the United States needs to make it very clear, both in public and in private, that the United States will defend Taiwan. We will defend the Philippines, which we have a mutual defense treaty. We need to start pre-positioning supplies in Taiwan and other places in the region, something we didn't do by and large with regard to Ukraine, and we saw what happened there. This is a time where I think it's gone beyond words, where we have to take actions because China is rapidly preparing to go to war. And it's not just its military. On the day that Yellen arrived, by the way, Xi Jinping was talking to the Eastern Theater Command, giving one of his let's go to war speeches. And the Eastern Theater Command is the one that would invade Taiwan. But we also see China mobilizing its civilians for war. They're doing a number of other things in preparation for going into battle. This looks exceedingly dangerous.
Something else that I want to talk about, this new economic data that came out of China showing that producer prices dropped 5.4% year over year. What is a signal, Gordon, and how troubling is it?
Yeah, for China, this is another sign that its export sector is in distress, as is manufacturing as a whole. But it's the entire Chinese economy, Tracy. China needs serious structural reform. It can't do it because, as a political matter, because that would cause too much pain. The Chinese economy is on a one-way trip down. They can hold things together because they've got strong currency controls, but we're starting to see that the Chinese people are giving up on their society. And that's most evident with the surge in Chinese migrants coming across our southern border, who are not the poor, by the way. They're middle-class Chinese because they can afford to pay $35,000 a head to the cartels in Mexico. So we see China basically at a point where the whole thing could melt away quite fast.
Yeah, and we're so intertwined right now, Gordon. What kind of impact would that have on the U.S.?
Well, first of all, there would be panic in global markets because Wall Street is not willing to acknowledge how serious the situation is in China. So they will be taken by surprise. And I think we're going to find that we're going to be scrambling for a number of products because our companies, although they're starting to become concerned about resilience, are not moving their supply chains out of China fast enough. And that's part because of corporate inaction, but it's also because there's no leadership on the part of the Biden administration to really push companies out of China, which is what we really need to do right now. Yes, that's going to be risky and dangerous, but we're at a point where everything is risky and dangerous.
We have about 30 seconds left or so, Gordon. Curious, what else is on your radar?
Well, at this particular time, I'm worried about the relationship between China and Russia. China is continuing to support the regime in Moscow with regard to the war in Ukraine. The Biden administration is, telling China not to do it, but China keeps on doing it. And so the Chinese see our warnings as hollow, and that never leads to a good result, especially as we saw in the 1930s.
We're going to leave it right there. Gordon, always great to be with you and get your insights. We appreciate it.